Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Mercy Cast, where we are learning the art of compassion through life's adversity. I am your host, Raleigh Sadler. And other than just leading a podcast, I also lead a nonprofit called Let My People Go. We work with churches to help you care for your most vulnerable neighbors. If this is something you want to learn about, reach out through the MercyCast website. We would love to come alongside of you and help you engage your community. Many of our guests have been people who have felt this call to engage others. They have felt this compassion well up within them to where they had to do something. And sometimes that looked differently, but oftentimes what they did was shaped by their experience, both positive and negative. Today, I want to talk about transition. We've all been through them. And sometimes they're really scary because there's this ripping you away from what you're comfortable with and delivering you to something new. And oftentimes when you enter into a new land or a new situation, everything's uncertain. It is very, very scary. And oftentimes when I'm doing it, and I've spent a lot of my life in transition, I feel like I made the biggest mistake of my life. This was stupid. What am I doing? This is going to end in abject failure. And okay, I'm just going to be that guy. At the end of the day, we are all in transition. And if we look at the scriptures, every character in the Bible is in the middle of a transition. Try me. Look, they're all in transition. And I think that this is a good example for all of us that no matter what you're going through, just remember you are going somewhere and God is leading you to the next place. Hold fast to the fact that you're not alone in this transition. I'm excited to invite the first president of a university to the Mercy Cast. I am here today with Greg Elzinga, the 13th president of Calvin College. Greg, welcome.
Thank you, Raleigh. Thanks so much for having me. It's good to be with you today.
Well, this is exciting because I have heard so much about Calvin over the years. I have worked with your graduates, and I haven't even had that stray bad one yet.
Thank you.
And again, I'm just glad that you're here. We have talked about this idea of transition. This is something that faces all of us. Could you share a little bit about your transition and how it ultimately led you to where you are now?
Yeah, thanks so much for being part of this podcast, allowing me to share with you today. It's been an interesting series of chapters in my life and career. I'm a graduate of Calvin, then Calvin College, now Calvin University back in 1990. We're a Christian liberal arts university based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I studied communications, arts, and sciences, then spent 16 years in the corporate sector. I went to get my master's in business when I was working as well, but spent 16 years in sales and sales leadership, leading teams, building teams, achieving goals and objectives, a lot of lessons learned, a lot of mistakes made over that 16-year career. And then at about the age of 38, this was kind of the first transition in my career, felt the Lord calling me in a different direction. I was encouraged by a lot of people to go to seminary to be a pastor. By then, we had 3 young children. My wife was a stay-at-home mom. I thought, I'm not sure if I'm feeling a strong call to pastoral ministry, but I was feeling a strong call to do something. And I typed the words business and ministry in Google. And one of the things that popped up was a nonprofit organization, a Christian ministry based in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I was living, doing economic development work. So this organization called Partners Worldwide was helping people out of poverty through small business growth and job creation in about 30 countries around the world. I left the financial security of a corporate career after 16 years and took a significant pay cut to join this ministry and spent the next decade plus working at Partners Worldwide, based out of Michigan, but doing work and traveling throughout India, Southeast Asia, and the Philippines, East Africa, Kenya, and Uganda, some in Haiti, and a little bit of Central America. And just a transformative 10-year chapter of my life where I interacted and worked with a network of people around the world, many of whom were underserved when it came to building, growing businesses. What I discovered through that time is some people think that people living in poverty just aren't working hard enough, or they're not trying hard enough. And the fact of the matter is many of them don't have access to the things that we take for granted, like access to affordable capital, training, mentoring, or access to markets. So it gave me a whole new perspective on what's really holding so many people in abject poverty around the world. A lot of it had to do with access. I went from 16 years in the corporate world, 10 years at Partners Worldwide. Just over 7 years ago, my alma mater, Calvin, now Calvin University, called me and asked if I would come back in the advancement department, which is fundraising, but really was transferable skills, my sales and leadership in corporate world, my fundraising and leadership at a nonprofit, and then doing fundraising for this place that I love so dearly. Then moved into a vice president for advancement role. A year ago today is when I moved into the interim president role, Calvin, and then more recently appointed as the 13th president of Calvin. So it's been an incredible journey. I never could have imagined this. This is not a job I ever had on my radar screen. But yet God provided a pathway, and my wife and I have just tried to be faithful and obedient to what God was calling us to do.
Greg, it sounds like God led you home. Does it feel like that?
It does in many ways because, when I was here, Raleigh, as a student, I started when I was 17. I was a young college student, 21 when I graduated. I was pretty immature. I did not see the way God was working in and through my experiences, my classes, my relationship with professors at the time that would influence me for different aspects of my career. I'm still friends with 2 professors who were instrumental in helping me in my days 35 plus years ago here at Calvin. And we still have coffee to this day. One of them just gave me, in fact, there's a piece of art behind me, a picture of a conductor that was in one of my professors, my advisor's office for over 20 years here at Calvin. And he gifted that to me as part of my inauguration as the president of Calvin. So this place has shaped me in profound ways. I'll tell you a little bit about what energizes me about being back here. When I would travel around the world and work with Partners Worldwide, I would inevitably come across people in India who knew of Calvin. And many of them, whether I was in Kenya, Uganda, India, Philippines, Haiti, when they learned that I'm a Calvin alum, they would say, let me tell you what Calvin people are doing in my city or my country or my nation or area. And what I heard repeatedly, Raleigh, was stories that were a physical manifestation of our mission statement. Our mission statement at Calvin is we equip students to think deeply, to act justly, but then the last part of this is to live wholeheartedly as Christ's agents of renewal in the world. And the stories I heard were people describing our alumni in business and engineering and education, government and healthcare as Christ's agents of renewal in the world. If I thought I could come back and be part of equipping the next generation of Christian young men and women to go out into all spheres of society to live, work, and serve as Christ's agents of renewal, sign me up for that.
I love that. And I love how Partners Worldwide ultimately led you to this position, because as you were describing your work with Partners Worldwide, you were talking about people who are vulnerable. And I would define vulnerable for the purpose of this conversation, experiencing an unmet need, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, that puts you at a social disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
You can also say being open to attack. I think that's how Webster defines it. But what I love about what you were doing is you were creating this atmosphere of empowerment. You weren't necessarily in Partners Worldwide in that position. You guys weren't coming in and saying, we're going to fix you. We're going to solve all your problems. You were trying to find the gaps and you were trying to address those. And it sounds like you were trying to address those with the local stakeholders and help them do the thing that they were called to do. I think there's a huge connection between that and what you're doing at Calvin University. I called it Calvin College earlier. I was wrong. Sackcloth and ashes, man. I was wrong. But,
no worries.
But that said, I think there's got to be a connection. You have spent your career focusing on empowerment, and now you're in a place where you can empower students. How do you see those two connected?
A great observation about the work of Partners Worldwide and how it relates to my work here at Calvin. You're right. Partners Worldwide didn't come in to do something for a people or a community. It came alongside. And in many ways, my role as president is just one of hundreds of jobs here at Calvin. You know, we have a couple hundred faculty. We have several hundred staff that are showing up every single day And so I think one of the things I'm trying to do at Calvin is to take a little bit of the reverence and awe out of the role of presidents within higher education institutions. I think it's actually put up on a pedestal a little too much. It's an important job. I won't deny that. It's a big job with a lot of demands. But what makes a place like Calvin great is a community of people united by a shared mission. I have the opportunity as the leader to try and create, to the best of my ability, along with my leadership team, a campus culture that we come alongside each other. Because there is so much in our world, in our culture, that is seeking to divide us and take us off the mission that we believe God has entrusted to this institution. And it's making a huge impact around the world in every sector of the economy. We're graduating 800 to 900 young men and women each year that are going out and serving in those areas as Christ agents of renewal. To be able to come alongside our students, faculty, and staff, it's a shared effort that really drives that mission. The president has an important job, but my job is to try and create an atmosphere and a culture where we can execute on that mission to the very best of our ability. And a lot of that is coming alongside, not doing something for anybody, but really coming alongside and doing it with them.
During a time where there are record numbers of students and youth leaving the church, you are doing something at Calvin where people are reversing that trend. And I love it because so many of us are tired of inauthenticity. We're tired of people who play the church game. They do the Sunday Christian thing. They put it on Sunday and they pretend. We need people who walk the walk and back up their talk. I love that that is what you're instilling in these students. And you're doing it in a way where you are focusing on empowerment. I love how you said walk with, because I look at the early chapters of Acts. I went to seminary and I did all the things that checked all the boxes. I thought I was going to be a pastor, and then I ended up running a nonprofit. It's fun how God takes us in different directions in ministry through our vocations. But in those early chapters of Acts, we all want to use that as a paradigm. Like, here's how we plant a church. But if we really look at it, that's a bunch of vulnerable people who came together. And that's why the church kept growing, because they were a pack of strays. And they were coming together and they were depending on each other. And no one was trying to fix the other person. But they were coming alongside. And what I found in ministry is sometimes the people that I think I'm going to help actually were sent there to help me.
Oh, I have countless stories of where I thought I was going to serve somebody, and in the process of serving them was far more blessed by what I learned from those individuals. And there's some specific stories I could cite, but they would probably take too long. But I do want to touch upon something else you mentioned about kind of the young people. You know, we have about 3,600 students here on campus, undergrad and graduate students. And while there are plenty of data points that suggest that the younger generation is either disenfranchised with or leaving the institutional church as we know it, I'm convinced that reinforces the importance of a mission of Calvin. And while no institution does this perfectly, generally speaking, if we do our jobs well, we are launching 800 to 900 graduates each year to be the church of Jesus Christ in the marketplace. It might be in government, might be in business, might be in education, might just be in their community where they live, work, and serve. But I see young people wanting to see the church gathered on Sunday morning be the church of Jesus Christ scattered Monday through Saturday. We have the opportunity to launch young men and women to be the church of Jesus Christ scattered in every sphere of society. It doesn't diminish what happens on Sunday morning in the church gathered. When I think back to the story I shared earlier about not feeling a call to pastoral ministry at the age of 38 to go to seminary, I truly believe my calling is to encourage and equip believers, in this case, young men and women in this entire campus community and myself, to be the church of Jesus Christ in the areas where God has us planted, whether that's the marketplace, our local community, the city of Grand Rapids, or this country in which we live.
Well, and you are clearly the person God has placed in this position. Has there ever been a moment where you're like, is this too big for me? Did you ever have doubts when you were going into this? Because I know in transition, that's definitely plagued me before, where I'm like, am I really the person that's supposed to do this? Kind of like Moses. Like, it's probably another reason I took the name Let My People Go. Has that ever happened to you as you go into the next thing?
Yeah, Raleigh, if I'm honest, I do experience imposter syndrome, right? Where I sometimes wonder, how did I get here? And what am I doing here? Because this was not part of my career plan. To the best of my knowledge, I'm the first president of Calvin in recent decades, if not history, that doesn't have a PhD or an MDiv. We started as a seminary 150 years ago. We're going to be 150 years old next year. It's our celebration of our 150th anniversary, which is a wonderful celebration. But we've had any leaders have been pastors and or eventually then PhDs for a number of years. Yet God has called me for whatever reason to this role at this time. But there are days, there's parts of this job, and I think any president would probably admit this if they're honest with themselves. There's parts of the job that when I'm doing it, I'm like, God, you created me for this. I can see your hand. I can see how my past experience had prepared me for the challenges that you presented me with. There's other parts of the job where I feel so out of my comfort zone. That's where I have felt God's presence in such tangible ways. It's even hard to describe. And sometimes it's just through the supernatural presence of the Holy Spirit. At times when I'm in a meeting that's really hard and I don't know what to say, I just have to trust my heart in the wisdom of God to speak and share what I believe He's leading me to share. And then there's other times where I feel God's presence in the team that I'm surrounded by. We have a phenomenal leadership team here at Calvin. In the areas where I'm weak, I'm surrounded by people who are really gifted in a lot of different areas. So at the times that I wonder, what in the world am I doing here? That's when I feel God speak through His Holy Spirit with the people He's surrounded me with.
I want to honor your honesty here because I think that if the chips were down for any one of us, at some level, we would have to own that, yes, no matter what we go into, there are those moments where we're like, did God get this one right? I know I've had that before. I'm like, I hope He's good at His job. I think He is. The creator of the universe has got to be good at His job, but it feels like a weird choice. And I've definitely been in that in my life. What I loved about what you just said is it's counterintuitive to this culture of strength finding that we find ourselves in. There's like a million strength finder assessments that we can take, and everyone will say we need to work out of our strengths. I do think that can be toxic. And I think weaknesses are needed. And what they do is they ground us in the present, they ground us in something bigger than ourselves. And they remind us that we need not only the Holy Spirit's guidance, but we need community. We need others. I don't think being dependent was a plan B. We were created to be dependent, and then sin it exacerbated it. But we were always created to be dependent human beings. I think we need a vulnerability finder. I think that ties us into who we are supposed to be. And so what's that been like to navigate for you?
Yeah, you talked about dependence. Two other words come to mind, and the process of sanctification, right? The unfolding process of holiness in my life over many years, and it happens every day. Two words that I think are so critical for me anyways, of trying to follow what I believe God's will is and way is for my life are submission and surrender.
Ooh.
And those are two words that are so countercultural today. The U.S. culture would tell you don't surrender to anybody and you don't submit to anything. We're a very individualistic society in many ways.
Yeah.
But I have found God's presence in my life when I've been willing to submit and surrender. And it's not always easy. And I obviously don't, none of us do it perfectly. But that's where I've seen God's presence at work, His willingness to bless me in ways far beyond what I could imagine. Not always exactly what I want, but exactly what I need at that time. And I have felt that both personally and professionally over this last year as I've stepped into this role rather unexpectedly. And I've been prayed for and encouraged by so many people. It's been phenomenal. The process of submission and surrender is one I'm constantly praying for the courage to live into and live up to.
Why do you think we are so scared of submission and surrender?
I think it's a lack of control. I think sin manifests itself in so many different ways in our lives. And for me, being in control and being in power over something or someone can be driven by sin in unhealthy ways. So with my team around me, with my campus community. I'm called to lead. And sometimes as a leader, you also need to be willing to surrender and submit. And that leadership and those two words are not rarely put together. Try to listen well to others along the way. It's a constant battle for me in a leadership role at a time where the cultural political landscape or institutions of higher education, being a leader of any institution, whether it be the church or a Christian college university, is increasingly complex. So being willing, what gives me a sense of peace is that submission and surrender. As odd as that may sound, giving up control in some ways gives me a sense of peace that God, you got this. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. We're going to have to make some tough decisions along the way, but I know in the end, you're going to be faithful. While I can't see around the corner or the other side, I know you can. And I know it's going to be okay.
And you didn't just arrive here magically. This is something that's been happening over your journey. There's an objective record of God meeting you at your point of need and delivering you to the next thing. Even early on, when you had that first shift, when you took the pay cut, when you took that risk, what happened to where you were like, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to venture into the unknown?
Yeah. I'll give you a very practical example. It was the day I accepted the job to leave the corporate world and go work for the Partners Worldwide. I was doing the math. And again, we had 3 young kids at home. My wife was a stay-at-home mom. She was a teacher for 8 years, but stay-at-home mom at that point. And I was doing the math on how much money I was going to take home after taxes and all that stuff. And it was not enough money for us to stay in our home. And we had 2 of our kids enrolled already in a Christian school and are planning on our 3rd going to that same school. Our monthly bills were not going to be covered in a pretty basic lifestyle, but I mean, a home and life were not going to be covered by what I was going to make. All of a sudden, the reality set in. While I feel this strong sense of God's calling to go do this, there's not enough money to keep our kids in the school or to stay in this house. And we did not have plans for my wife to go back to work yet. Our youngest was still at home. And we said, if this is going to work, my wife is going to have to go back to work. She had nothing lined up. She put her feelers out. Within about 3 to 4 weeks, Raleigh, she had a job offer from the Christian school where our kids were attending. My wife was a teacher in the past, a part-time job for 20 to 22 hours a week for just the right amount of money to make it work. And that was one of the first times where I truly, at the age of 38, even though I've been a Christian all my life and raised in a Christian home, that I took a step of faith and I saw God show up in a very tangible way and say, you know what? You're following what you believe your calling is on my life to go do this job. I'm going to provide not more than you need, but just what you need to make it work. And my wife and I can point to time and time again throughout that 10 years where God provided in ways for our needs. And we have been blessed beyond belief. So that was the first tangible expression. And even in this role over last year, I've seen God provide encouragers, prayer partners, support from my cabinet leadership team as I stepped into this role. I could go on seeing God's presence manifest itself through whether it's prayers, the presence of the Holy Spirit, or others that God has brought along my side.
I think it's important to note that He met you after you took that step. Like a lot of us are waiting for things to be written in the clouds, and you took that step. You saw, okay, God's got me. You surrendered and you submitted and you said, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I think I'm supposed to do it. Even if I'm not supposed to do it, it'll work out. We'll be okay. But I think so many of us feel a little paralyzed or drag our feet because we've been failed before. Will we be failed again? But taking that step, I think that's the beauty of faith. It's trusting that God has got you on the other end. I love how even in the story of Moses, he's like, how am I going to know that this is what I'm really supposed to do? And he's like, you will worship God on this mountain. He's basically saying, after it's all said and done, that's when I'll give you your assurance that you were supposed to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another story that comes up is when the priests are carrying the Ark of the Covenant across the Jordan River. And I've read some biblical historians that said, the river was at flood stage. In other words, it's not something you were just wade in, right? Ankle deep, then knee deep. And scripture says that It wasn't until their foot touched the surface of the water that the waters parted and they could carry the Ark of the Covenant through the river. They had to take that first step and touch the water, and then God parted the water. You see your path, and then you're going to walk through. So it is taking that first step of faith, trusting that God is going to open up the way. Maybe not always exactly the way we want it, or as easy as we want it, or everything we want, but just enough to get us through.
And I am not here to say faith is reckless, but I think to some who are watching it, walking by faith can look reckless because you're making decisions that may not always seem like the safest bet. And you changing careers multiple times. I was talking to someone recently and he was just recounting my life with me. And he goes, your bingo card has been weird since 2012. You were supposed to do this and you didn't stay doing this. You ended up doing that. And then you ended up doing this. But it's like everything in my past has prepared me for the moment now. And it's trained me for what I'm doing now. And who's to say what I'll be doing in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Right.
I'm kind of holding things with an open hand right now, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm hearing that in your story. That surrender and submitting to God is very evident because I don't think you would want to be willing to do what you've done to get you to where you are now if you weren't trusting Jesus.
No, I'm not that smart enough. I'm not that brave enough or courageous enough. Some may call it naivete or foolishness. I trust that the Lord's working in ways that I do not fully understand, and the complexity of everything that I'm navigating, whether it be personally, professionally, or spiritually, that God's hand is at work. One of the things, Raleigh, that I've used with our campus community, and it's given me a sense of assurance. The Christian Reformed Church, the church of which our school was founded in and belongs to, has a contemporary testimony. There's something called Our World Belongs to God, and that's the name of the contemporary testimony. And there's a part of it that I have shared many times as, even now, as history unfolds in ways we only know in part, we are assured that God is with us in our world, holding all things in tender embrace and bending them to his purpose. The confidence that the Lord is faithful gives meaning to our days and hope to our years. The future is secure, for our world belongs to God. And to me, in fact, those are words that were put on a beautiful piece of pottery that was given to me by our art department as part of my inauguration. The future is secure, for our world belongs to God. So in the midst of whatever people are struggling with personally, professionally, spiritually, trying to navigate the world in which we live and all the dynamics, I rest in those words. As history unfolds in ways we only know in part, God is with us in our world, holding all things in tender embrace and bending them to his purpose.
It's so good. And that is so reassuring that we are not alone. We are covered. We are seen. We are safe, in a sense, in his arms. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I would love, just in these final moments, how would you encourage us as we're processing our own moves, our own transitions, our own uncertainties?
One of the things that's challenging for me as a leader, and this is the way I'm going to address it maybe for the listening audience, is when I sit down with an individual or oftentimes large groups of people, I have to quickly take the pulse of the person or the people in the room to the best of my ability on where are they at right now? Where are they at emotionally, spiritually, mentally, with what's going on in their life, within our campus, within the world? Sometimes I'll focus on just trying to point people to the future, the vision for Calvin University and our plans to get there and our plans to be even a stronger, more influential Christian university in the world. And people say, time out, I'm hurting.
Yeah.
I'm confused. I'm anxious. I don't know what's going on in our world with politics. I don't know what's going on in my church. I don't know what's going on across campus. So as a leader, I'm constantly trying to either be pastoral in a way of saying, okay, time out, let's talk about that. But then I've been with people where I address the pastoral side and people say, okay, but don't we have to point to the future? Isn't there, give me hope too. So I just want to encourage the listening audience, create space in your own life for both lament but also hope, right? An unhealthy balance of either one is probably not good. Whether it's lament or reflection or being willing to be honest with ourselves and with others about what we're struggling with, let's not dwell there. Let's also believe that the future is secure, for our world belongs to God. It's a both and, that wherever people are struggling, personally, professionally, career, spiritual life, create space and surround yourself with people who are willing to listen and lament and reflect and process, but also people who can say, but you know what? Our future is secure. Our world belongs to God. Let's look to the future too.